The room hummed with quiet tension, broken only by the low beep of an incoming transmission. Captain Daniel Hayes sat forward in his chair, eyes locked on the monitor in front of him. Outside, the sun was setting over the ruins of what was once a bustling city, casting long shadows over the jagged skyline. The air smelled of smoke and iron, remnants of battles fought and lost. Incoming message from the Keldarin fleet. His communications officer, Lieutenant Walker, announced, her voice tight with worry. Put it through, Hayes ordered, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his gut. He knew what was coming. The Keldarins had made a name for themselves as conquerors, their reputation for wiping out entire civilizations legendary across the galaxy. But this wasn't just any message, it was a prelude to the final blow. The screen flickered, and a figure appeared. Tall and imposing, Commander Zivran of the Keldarin Empire stared back with cold, unblinking eyes. Behind him, the gleaming interior of his warship exuded sterile efficiency, a stark contrast to the chaos that had overtaken Earth. Zivran's voice came through clear and sharp, as if he was standing in the room. Earth is a death world, Zivran began, his tone dripping with disdain. Your planet has resisted longer than expected. But this resistance is futile. Reinforcements are en route. Surrender now, or face extinction. Hayes clenched his jaw, forcing himself to remain calm. We've heard that before, he replied, his voice cutting through the silence. You underestimated us once. Don't make the same mistake again. Zivran's eyes narrowed, but a smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Arrogance will not save you. We are far superior in every way. Your kind is on borrowed time. Hayes leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he measured his response. We may not have your tech, he said, his tone shifting from formal to calculated. But we have something your empire fears more than our weapons. Zivran scoffed. And what could that be? The Nightmare Protocol, Hayes said flatly. For a brief moment, the Keldarin commander's composure faltered. It was subtle, a twitch of his jaw, the brief flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but Hayes saw it. The human resistance had learned long ago that fear was as powerful a weapon as any gun or bomb. And the mention of the Nightmare Protocol had always hit its mark. The Nightmare Protocol is a myth, Zivran sneered, but his bravado rang hollow. A scare tactic. Hayes didn't flinch. Then why do you look so nervous, Commander? Silence stretched across the transmission. Zivran's expression hardened, but the smirk was gone. This is your final warning, Captain. We will not offer another. The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the room in an oppressive stillness. Lieutenant Walker turned toward Hayes, her face pale. What now, sir? Hayes stood, his movements deliberate and measured. No, he said, looking out the window at the smoldering horizon. We prepare to remind them why Earth is a death world, and why America is their worst nightmare. The weight of his words settled over the room like a shroud, the last of the sunlight fading behind the shattered buildings. They had survived the initial invasion through sheer will, but what came next would be a test of everything they had left. The final battle was coming. And this time, the Keldarins weren't facing just another planet. They were facing humanity's full fury. The faint rumble of distant explosions shook the ground beneath the command center. Inside, the tension was palpable, thick enough to be cut with a knife. Captain Hayes paced the length of the room, his mind racing. The Keldarin threat loomed larger with each passing moment, and he knew time was running out. Lieutenant Walker tapped furiously on her console, pulling up the latest intel. Keldarin reinforcements will arrive in 24 hours, sir. Their fleet's trajectory shows a direct approach, no evasive maneuvers, no hesitation. They're that confident, Hayes muttered, stopping at the edge of the holographic table that displayed Earth's current defense grid. His eyes scanned the blue and red indicators, representing human forces and Keldarin battalions. They were horribly outnumbered, but that wasn't what concerned him. The real problem was whether their desperation plan would work. Hayes turned toward the small group assembled before him. His core team, Lieutenant Walker, Sergeant Mason, and Dr. Lila Abrams, the brilliant scientists who had helped develop their most unconventional strategies. Together, they were the last line of defense. They know we're on the back foot. Sergeant Mason grunted, his muscular arms crossed over his chest. He was built like a tank, a soldier who'd seen too many battles yet refused to quit. But they don't know what's coming. Dr. Abrams, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, cleared her throat. The Nightmare Protocol isn't just a scare tactic, she began, her voice carrying a weight of gravity that silenced the room. It's real. It was designed as a last-ditch defense mechanism, but we haven't tested it on this scale. If we deploy it now, it could destabilize Earth's entire ecosystem. Hayes nodded, the weight of the decision pressing down on his shoulders. He knew the risks. The protocol was a bioweapon, one of Earth's deadliest creations. It could cripple the Keldarans, but it could also turn Earth into a wasteland. And yet, without it, there would be no Earth left to save. We don't have a choice, he said finally, his voice cold and resolute. If we don't strike first, they'll wipe us out. A thick silence followed. Hayes' team knew the gravity of what they were discussing. The protocol wasn't just about defending humanity. It was about unleashing something that could change the very fabric of life on Earth. Yet, the alternative was far worse. Sergeant Mason cracked his knuckles, his expression grim. What do you need me to do, Captain? Hayes straightened, his mind shifting into gear. We'll need to draw their fleet in close. If we deploy the protocol too soon, they'll have time to retreat. But if we bait them, get them close to the surface. He gestured toward the map, his finger tracing the route the Keldarans would likely take. We hit them with everything we've got. Walker, you'll manage the comms, keep them distracted, make them think we're negotiating. Lieutenant Walker's lips thinned, but she nodded. Understood, sir. Dr. Abrams, Hayes continued, turning to the scientist. I need you to coordinate with the science division. Prep the protocol for immediate launch. No mistakes. This has to be flawless. Abrams took a deep breath, nodding. I'll oversee it personally. Hayes looked around the room, locking eyes with each of his team members. This is it. Our final stand. If the Keldarans break through, we lose everything, our homes, our people. But if we succeed, he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We show them why Earth is a death world. And why they should have stayed away. The group exchanged solemn glances, but there was an unspoken agreement between them, a shared determination that coursed through the room like electricity. They knew the risks, the potential cost, but they had come too far to back down now. The lights flickered momentarily as another explosion shook the command center. Outside, the distant hum of Keldaran ships grew louder, their arrival imminent. Sergeant, Hayes said, his voice taking on a sharper edge, get your men ready. We're going to need every bit of firepower we have. They won't go down easy. Mason saluted sharply and exited the room without a word. The others followed suit, each heading to their stations. Hayes stood alone for a moment, staring at the holographic map. The red indicators were multiplying, the threat growing with each passing second. But there was no room for fear. No time for hesitation. They had one shot to turn the tide, and they would take it, no matter the consequences. Hayes clenched his fists, a steely determination settling over him. Let's show them what humanity is made of. The tension in the command center was electric. Everyone moved with a sense of urgency, fully aware that the next few hours could decide the fate of Earth. Hayes stood at the center of it all, his eyes locked on the holographic display that projected the approaching Keldaran fleet. The enemy's ships moved like a storm, silent and ominous, sweeping toward Earth's upper atmosphere with deadly precision. Sir, all human forces are on standby, Lieutenant Walker reported, her voice steady but tense. We're tracking over 50 Keldaran warships in the first wave. They'll be in range in less than 10 minutes. Good, Hayes replied, his eyes narrowing. The protocol was ready, but timing was everything. Too soon, and the Keldarans would scatter. Too late, and Earth's defenses wouldn't hold. He exhaled slowly, feeling the pressure build like a coiled spring in his chest. Sergeant Mason's gruff voice came through the comms. Ground units are positioned, Captain. They know what's at stake. Hayes glanced at Walker, giving her a quick nod. Patch me through to all units. With a flick of a switch, Walker connected him to every soldier, pilot, and technician fighting to hold the line. Hayes took a deep breath before speaking, his voice steady but commanding. Attention all units. This is it. The Keldarans think they can wipe us out, that we'll crumble before their might. But they've underestimated us. We've survived on this planet by facing challenges no one else could. We've thrived in conditions that would kill most. We are humanity. Earth is our home, and we will defend it. A roar of cheers crackled through the comms as the soldiers and pilots prepared for battle. The energy was palpable, a mix of fear, determination, and defiance. Hayes felt it too, but there was no time to indulge in emotion. He had a job to do. Dr. Abrams appeared by his side, her eyes focused yet filled with unease. The protocol is prepped for deployment, Captain. Once they're within range, we'll have a 5-minute window to trigger it. Will it be enough? Hayes asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it again. Abrams hesitated for a split second. It has to be. Before Hayes could respond, the first alarm blared. The Keldarans had arrived. Enemy ships entering the outer atmosphere! Walker shouted, her hands flying over the console. They're accelerating. Looks like they're planning a full frontal assault. Hayes tightened his grip on the edge of the command table. Hold the line. Wait for my signal. Outside, the battle had already begun. Human fighter jets roared into the sky, their engines screaming as they shot toward the Keldaran fleet. Anti-aircraft fire lit up the darkened sky like fireworks, the ground defenses unleashing everything they had. Explosions rocked the horizon as the first wave of enemy ships collided with Earth's defensive grid. Inside the command center, the air was thick with anticipation. Every screen showed the battle unfolding in real time, human forces pushing back, holding their ground, but only barely. Hayes knew it wouldn't last long. The Keldarans were relentless, their superior technology battering Earth's defenses with ruthless efficiency. Captain, we've lost 5 defense platforms in Sector 7, Walker called out. They're pushing through. Hayes clenched his jaw. Mason, redirect ground forces to Sector 7. We can't let them break through. On it! Mason's voice was a growl, the sound of a man ready to fight to the last breath. Abrams stepped closer, her voice low but urgent. Captain, we need to activate the protocol now. If we wait any longer... I know. Hayes cut her off, his eyes fixed on the display as the Keldarans closed in. Just a little longer. Time stretched thin. Each second felt like an eternity as Hayes watched the enemy ships descend. The planet trembled with every explosion, every shot fired. The human forces were giving everything they had, but it wouldn't be enough. Then, like a trigger pulled in his mind, Hayes saw the moment. The Keldarans were within range. This was it. Deploy the protocol, he ordered, his voice calm, steady. The room fell silent as Abrams rushed to her station, her fingers moving in a blur across the controls. On the main display, a small green icon blinked to life, a signal that the protocol had been activated. Outside, the sky seemed to ripple as the bioweapon was released. Invisible to the naked eye, the protocol spread like a living entity, a wave of nanotechnology designed to disrupt the Keldaran ships at a molecular level. Within moments, the first enemy warship faltered. Then another. The ripple effect spread, and suddenly, the once unstoppable fleet began to break apart. Sir, it's working, Walker whispered, awe in her voice. The Keldaran ships, they're falling back. Hayes exhaled, the weight of the moment hitting him. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had turned the tide. But the battle wasn't over yet. As the Keldarans scrambled to retreat, Hayes knew there would be repercussions. The enemy would regroup, and when they did, they would come back with a vengeance. Don't get too comfortable, Hayes muttered, more to himself than anyone else. This is just the beginning. The lights flickered, and the hum of the command center filled the silence once more. But for now, there was a brief, fragile victory. Earth still stood, and humanity had shown its teeth. The command center's temporary calm was shattered by the shrill wail of an alarm. Hayes didn't need to ask. His instincts told him the worst wasn't over yet. The Keldarans were retreating, but they weren't fleeing out of fear. It was strategic. Tactical. A more devastating blow was coming. Lieutenant Walker snapped to attention, her voice strained. Captain, we're picking up energy surges from the remaining Keldaran fleet. They're preparing to launch an orbital strike, targeting major cities. Hayes clenched his fists, his mind racing. This was the death blow. The Keldarans couldn't overpower Earth's defense grid, so they were going to make the humans pay in blood. He glanced at Dr. Abrams, who stood by the console, her face pale. The protocol bought us time, but it wasn't enough to disable their entire fleet, Abrams muttered. We're still outnumbered. Hayes leaned over the command table, studying the holographic display. Pulsing red icons representing the Keldaran ships began to reposition themselves above Earth's most populated areas. This was no longer a battle, it was a massacre waiting to happen. And they were out of tricks. Mason, Hayes barked into the comms. Status on ground forces? Pinned down, sir. But we're holding. Mason's voice was rough, punctuated by the sound of gunfire in the background. Not for long, though. These Keldaran troops aren't messing around. Hayes ground his teeth. His soldiers were fighting with everything they had, but they couldn't hold back an orbital strike. He turned to Walker. Get me a direct line to the Keldaran command ship. Walker's eyebrows shot up. Sir? Do it, he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. As Walker scrambled to establish the connection, Hayes caught a glimpse of his reflection in the dim glow of the console. His face was a mask of exhaustion, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. This wasn't how humanity was going to fall. Not after everything they'd fought for. The comms crackled to life. Connection established, Walker announced, her voice shaking slightly. They're on the line. Hayes stepped forward, his voice cold as steel. This is Captain Hayes of the Earth Defense Command. I demand to speak with your commanding officer. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a low, guttural voice filled the room. This is General Kothar of the Keldaran Empire. You are in no position to demand anything human. Hayes felt a wave of anger, but he swallowed it down. There was no time for ego. You're about to fire on civilians, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Innocent lives. They are irrelevant, Kothar responded, his tone dismissive. Your planet's resistance has become an inconvenience. We will burn it to the ground. Hayes' jaw tightened, but his mind was already moving ahead, searching for an edge, something, anything, he could use to stop the impending strike. And then it hit him. If you destroy Earth, Hayes said slowly, his tone deliberate, you lose the only thing that matters to you, control. The line went quiet again, but this time, Hayes sensed he had Kothar's attention. He pressed on. We both know this isn't about wiping out a few billion humans. This is about power. You came here to enslave us, to make us bow to the Keldaran Empire. But if you turn Earth into a graveyard, you lose your prize. You'll have nothing but ash. A low rumble echoed through the comms, and Hayes realized it was Kothar laughing. You think you can bargain with me, human? You have no leverage. Not yet, Hayes replied, his voice deadly calm. But give me 1 hour, and I'll give you a reason to reconsider. I propose a ceasefire, just long enough for you to see what Earth can really do. There was another pause, but this one was longer, more contemplative. Kothar was calculating, weighing his options. Finally, he spoke again, his voice dripping with arrogance. You have 1 hour, Captain Hayes. If you fail to impress me, I will rain fire upon your cities, and there will be nothing left of your pitiful species. The connection cut off, and Hayes exhaled sharply. He turned to his team, who were staring at him with a mix of shock and confusion. An hour? Walker asked, her voice incredulous. What are we supposed to do in an hour? Hayes didn't hesitate. We show them why Earth is a death world. Abrams blinked, understanding dawning on her face. You mean the black site? Hayes nodded grimly. The Keldrons think they've seen everything we can throw at them, but they haven't seen the black site tech. If we can launch it from the underground bunker in time, we can scramble their systems and turn the tide for good. Walker's fingers flew across the console as she accessed the black site's hidden network. It's risky, she murmured. That tech was never fully tested. We don't know what kind of impact it could have on. We don't have a choice. Hayes cut in. The alternative is watching Earth burn. Abrams stepped forward, determination settling in her eyes. We'll need to coordinate with Mason's ground forces to create a distraction. If the Keldrons detect the black site launch, they'll destroy it before we have a chance. Mason will handle it, Hayes said. We focus on getting that tech online. The team sprang into action, the hum of urgency buzzing through the command center like a live wire. Hayes stood at the center of the chaos, his mind focused, clear. The next hour would determine everything: the survival of Earth, the fate of humanity, the legacy they would leave behind.